hydrogen side. We have an issue with one of the 4 engines at the core stage. She's awaiting a troubleshooting plan and a way forward. Engineers are currently discussing that plan at this very moment. The engineers telling the launch director they hope to have a discussion with her shortly, in the next 10 minutes, possibly. We're standing by for that. Artemis Launch Control.
Good morning, everybody. It's Launch Day America. I actually like that. That they've been using that as a hashtag now for a while at NASA. Launch Day America.
That's a great hashtag.
Let me turn your mic up.
Yeah, I know it. I'm not hearing me, so. All right. I'm still not hearing.
8 a.m. Eastern Time here at Launch Complex 39B at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We are currently holding at T-minus 40 minutes. It's an unplanned hold while the launch team works on an issue with engine number 3 in the core stage. We're standing by for a go-forward plan from the cryo team. They're still discussing that. Launch director is on standby.
Obviously, he didn't write his commentary out. That's the commentator from launch, the firing room.
And taking at 1:14 a.m. Eastern Time. Launch team getting both of the core stage tanks to 100%. Began tanking the upper stage. Once they started an engine bleed, they found that one of the engines didn't get the high accuracy temperature that they were looking for, and that is a constraint to launch. This is something they wanted to test during wet dress 4, but were unable to because they had a leak develop in the quick disconnect line that carries the engine bleed off of the engines and out to a flare stack.
Check.
So this is the first opportunity for this team to see this live in action. It's a particularly tricky issue even going in to get that temperature dialed in according to engineers.
I don't know if anybody has joined the stream and joined the Discord or anything like that.
I hear Chris is listening in on us, but I don't think he's hearing the launch director. Let me see. Hold on.
Your agents and that sort of thing.
I can't hear the director, but I've got NASA Spaceflight
So we
up
are
on my
standing
feed.
by.
Hey, you hear it now?
Yep.
Yeah, we're dialed into the launch director. Chris, you can pop in whenever you want. We'll put you up on screen. Chris Bavino.
The launch team, the launch director, consulting with some of the members on our team. Still waiting for the cryo team to report out. We'll have that as soon as it's ready. This is Artemis Launch Control.
So that's their update. They're still waiting on a potential fix, or if the constraints meet launch. I mean, one of the videos that we have in the arsenal to play back if we get delayed today, we can start with it. It's called "Space is Hard."
That's true.
It's very aptly named. Space is hard. There's no guarantees. I mean, this all worked when they did the cryo fire out at Stennis. But things happen.
Keep in mind they have not gotten to this point. The wet dress rehearsal didn't get to this point. So this problem they're having with engine 3, this didn't occur before. So they don't know how to deal with this yet.
I thought they got to engine. No, they didn't because they couldn't finish tanking. That's right.
Right. Yep. There was a leak before propellant load, so they didn't even get to that point. So this is kind of a new thing for them, but it looks like I'm seeing some chats come across here that they might have fixed it. So we'll see what happens here.
And Harry is our Apollo expert, but he also did a lot of reading on Artemis last night when I gave him the press kit.
That's right. So for those people tuning in, this is a special broadcast by WCPC Cable Channel 15. You would normally be watching
Buster this morning.
Buster McMahon this morning, but Pete Coles, who is our resident space expert here and also our producer and chief engineer for WCPC Cable Channel 15.
Would rather be in Florida right now.
Would rather be in Florida right now, but elected to bring this broadcast because this is so historic. So I am Harry Rock. Normally you'd see me on Rock on Westfield or Westfield Council on Aging Presents. I'll be on tomorrow morning, Tuesday, at 8 o'clock with Kathy Palmer for Ken's Den. But excited to have been asked to join Pete. Pete, you want to introduce our guest that we have with us?
Yeah, Chris Bavino from the Western Mass Storm Chasers. friend of mine, and also his child is a train and rocket nut as well. So he follows in his father's footsteps.
Well, welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, he surprised me this morning because I told him about this, I think Wednesday. And a lot has happened in his life since Wednesday. He had his birthday, his 4th birthday. He had a birthday party. And then he comes downstairs this morning and says, "Daddy, is the rocket launching today?" And I was like, "Oh, he remembered?" I was like, "Wow. Okay. All right. Well, yes, it is. Well, hopefully."
And that's the big thing, too. That's the big thing that the NASA really needs to get a next generation excited for this if you want to go to Mars. That's the big thing about this is they really need to have that next generation excited like they were in the Apollo era to say, we really want to go to Mars, and this is how we're going to do it. So, I mean, this is a big thing for them because they now have competition. Even in the heavy lift category, they now have competition. The Russians really kind of out of the game. The European Space Agency sort of in the game with Ariane 6, but nothing to the magnitude of this Artemis, the Space Launch System, or the oncoming Starship Super Heavy combination. Those are going to be the main. I think those are going to be the main competitors to get to another planet.
Yeah, Blue Origin's got their New Glenn too, but that's still a ways out.
And I don't think that has the capability that this does, or even a Super Heavy.
No,
it's not projected for that.
No, I mean, Starship is designed for pretty much anything, right? So it's for people, it's for payload, it's for Mars. It seems like NASA really wants to take control of the whole moon thing, and SpaceX wants to do everything other than the moon. So they kind of have their own plan moving forward. Elon has been really about Mars and making sure we get there, and NASA is really just about let's go back to the moon and put a base there.
Well, I think all those components are needed, though.
I agree. NASA, however, it costs a lot more to send people to space as opposed to the other space organizations. So that's the thing to look at too. This has been. I saw some picture today that said it was like $60,000 per kilogram or something. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise
me. That's for NASA. And then it was like $10 per kilogram for Starship.
Well, that's the thing.
Wow.
That's the thing that Elon Musk has been talking about is getting that cost per pound or kilogram of mass to orbit. If you can get that cost down, you will become a spacefaring society. The problem with this is when Congress funded this, they didn't really fund it properly. They didn't say come up with something new and innovate. They actually said in the law that you need to reuse as many flight-capable or off-the-shelf parts as you can, and that put a lot of constraints. And this launch was supposed to happen in 2018. And it is billions and billions of dollars over budget because they're trying to adapt things that weren't quite made for this. The engines on the rocket, as you saw, Harry, were shuttle era.
Right. I heard that this morning.
Shuttle main engines.
Reusing a lot of that technology.
Right. The main redesign is that big orange thing you see, the core stage. Mm-hmm. That was the real redesign. It's not just a tank there. There's actual hardware, flight hardware, things like that. The Orion capsule is new. The flight system to pull it away, the launch abort system is kind of a reused design. It's Apollo era reused design.
Right.
The inner stage, the thing that gets it into that final push into orbit, is off a Delta IV Heavy, and they haven't finished the design for the actual stage. The EUS, I think is what it's called.
It's the European module.
Well, no, that module's there. The service module, that's in there. But the actual kick stage to get it in the third, well, it would be second stage, to get it up there hasn't been finished. The cryo stage is what they call it. So they're using what they use on a Delta IV Heavy right now. It doesn't have as much kick, but it'll do the job for this mission, right? So there's all kinds of things that are kind of piecemeal together. And you'd think it would be cheaper to do it that way. Well, it's not. Not even close. So these are the pitfalls that they've been dealing with for this, and it is way behind schedule. I mean, this is... I hope they go today because it's another embarrassment for NASA if they don't.
Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
Let me just jump in quickly. You were mentioning the other players in the space race here. Where does China fit in? I know Russia is really a non-player right now, but I was hearing on the news that China is really making some big inroads, and that
China's a player.
They're a serious player, and they're the ones that really could compete with us as far as getting to the moon.
But if you look at their rocket technology, they're still up and coming. I mean, so the communist model of doing things is you steal technology.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really innovate on your own. You steal what you can, and then you try to reverse engineer and or get it to work. So that's what they're doing right now. They're stealing whatever they can. They have several solid rocket vehicles that work pretty well, but the fuels are very suspect, and they're all using very, very toxic fuels. A lot of their rockets are burning hypergolics, which we stopped using eons ago because of their toxicity in the air and things like that. So they're a major polluter in their space race, but in their single-mindedness, they have a space station that's orbiting the Earth right now.
Yes, they do.
That's manned.
Yep.
They have, I don't know what are they calling they're not calling them cosmonauts. Right? They're calling them, there's another term for Chinese astronauts. But yeah, they're orbiting the Earth and they're launching manned missions and they're hell bent on getting to the moon before us. And the scenario, if you watch For All Mankind, the scenario that plays out in that is now playing out with the Chinese instead of the Russians.
It's a taikonaut.
Taikonaut? Okay.
And that term was created in 1998.
Yeah, Taikonaut, taikonaut, right.
We're hoping that Kenny wakes up, by the way. He'll be joining us in that final square.
Yeah, I was wondering if Kenny was going to be coming in here.
He said he was going to try.
Because what time is it? He's out in Arizona. He's in
Vegas.
Vegas right now. So that's what, 2 hours behind us?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you guys want to see the first video that I have prepared?
Sure.
It's called Space is Hard.
Space travel is hard and unforgiving. It's always been and always will be.
It's going to be hard. There's a new chance of death. Going in a little can through deep space, it's a very harsh environment.
We think you can come back, but nothing is certain.
There are all sorts of challenges we will face on deep space missions. Communication delays, radiation protection, isolation of the crew.
So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are.
There's never going to be zero risk. When you're breaking the bonds of gravity, that's just part of the deal.
And it is one of the great adventures of all time.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro. Go, I don't go. Go.
That challenge is one that we're willing to accept.
Surgeon, go.
Man in his quest for knowledge cannot be deterred.
Space is not just a destination. It changes you forever.
It'll be tough, really tough, but we have the right people for the job.
We have pressed the qualities for success into system after system.
This country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested.
Pushed our people past every failure we can dream of. We have never been more ready to meet the unknown.
Through Artemis, we will once again explore beyond our world.
And we will succeed.
We are going. The history of this agency is marked with broken barriers, once viewed as impossible. with science fiction turned reality, with innovations that have spun industries all their own, and with demonstrations of peace for all humankind.
We soar in the skies of our home planet. We maintain a human presence just outside of gravity, and we touch points all across the solar system and beyond. We're going back to the moon, and this is why.
The moon is a treasure trove of science.
It holds opportunities for us to make discoveries about our home planet, about our sun,
and about our solar system.
The wealth of knowledge to be gleaned from the moon will inspire a new generation of thought and action.
Without fail, every major program and mission NASA has invested in has led to technologies and capabilities that have shaped our culture.
The breakthroughs of the Artemis era will define our generation and the generations to follow.
The tens of thousands of jobs associated with propelling us to the moon today are just the beginning of a lunar economy that will see hundreds of thousands of new jobs develop around the world.
This is not an ambition of one entity or one country. The exploration of the moon is a shared effort.
Woven together by a desire for the greater good.
Why the moon? Because the missions of tomorrow will be sparked by the accomplishments of the Artemis generation today.
because the ambition to go has already begun.
And because Mars is calling. We need to learn what it takes to establish a community on another cosmic shore. So let's camp close before pushing out.
And so, we go to the moon now, not as a series of isolated missions, but to build a community on and around the moon, capable of proving how to live on other worlds.
We'll use the lessons from more than 50 years of peaceful exploration to send a new generation to the lunar surface to stay.
We will anchor our efforts on the lunar South Pole to establish the Artemis Base Camp,
positioning us for long-term science and exploration of the lunar surface.
We will prove what it takes to assemble a complex ship in deep space.
We will perfect ascending down to and returning from a distant surface.
We will learn how humans can survive and thrive in a partial gravity environment.
Still working on a troubleshooting plan for engine number 3 that had the issue with the engine bleed. She's still waiting for more information about that. Engineers are still discussing it and going over some modeling and data. And once they have that ready, they're going to come back to her and have a discussion. And so she says that she's awaiting that, and we are standing by. Again, at T-minus 40 minutes, we'll have more information when we get it.
So
well, that's the update.
40 minutes at this point then. Because Pete, what time were they scheduled to originally launch?
8:32.
Okay, so we're definitely behind.
Yep, we're behind, but that's normal.
Yep.
I'm trying to work a problem because Les told me that we're not streaming.
Oh.
But anyways, we're still on 89.5. We're still on channel 15 direct, so I will take those. Do you want to go back to the video or?
Sure.
I just wanted to get that update.
Yep.
Reposition and relocate the supplies.
We will learn how to utilize the resources we find on these other worlds, starting with finding water ice and purifying it to drinkable water.
And refining that into hydrogen for fuel and oxygen to breathe.
We will establish fission power plants on the surface of the moon, capable of supporting a growing community of efforts.
And we will expand the logistics supply chain to enable commercial and international partners
To resupply and refuel deep space outposts.
None of this is simple or easy, but nothing in our history ever has been.
The Eagle has landed. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
This kind of continuous lunar presence is a natural extension of all that we've learned in low Earth orbit. And what we will accomplish there will ensure the monumental missions to Mars are within reach. As we ready the launch of the first Artemis mission, and as commercial companies ready their lunar landers for the first private payload deliveries, we have already begun to take the next step.
Now we're back. So we got that update. They're still in a holding pattern, which I'm not totally surprised about. I wonder what Tim Dodd's doing to fill time. He's probably taking questions from the audience.
So, Chris, where did your interest in space and space travel and rocket technology come from?
I don't know, really. I kind of just started watching when they were building Starbase out in Boca Chica for SpaceX, and I just kind of been slowly watching that come about and watching them design Starship. And I have a friend who actually works for SpaceX and actually built some of the boosters and the Starships that are going. So that's kind of cool. I went to Cape Canaveral earlier this year with my family, and we visited the NASA establishment there, and my son really got into it, and we saw a lot of the equipment they have over there. We didn't get to do too much just because he wanted to spend most of the time on the playground they have. But we did see a couple of Falcon 9 launches for Starlink, and I did see an Atlas V launch also.
You went in a good week then.
Yes, it was a very good week. And it's something watching a launch. I mean, even from where we were in Cocoa Beach, I think that's 12 miles away from the pad.
Yeah, most of them, yeah.
Yeah, so even then, you see the rocket, and then you hear the rocket, and then you feel the rocket. So the Atlas launch was certainly the more louder one, and it certainly packed more of a punch than Falcon 9 did. But
Atlas is actually the pad is closer.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
That explains that. Yep, that was fun. But yeah, my space has always been a thing of mine. I never got to go to space camp when I was back in school because my grades weren't good enough. So, I'd follow as much as I can. Now we have better technology where we can monitor these things, and they're testing places that they have for NASA and for SpaceX are scattered all over the place. And SpaceX can launch from California. They can launch. I think they have a spot in New Zealand. They're going to try to launch from some converted oil rigs at some point. And they're building a pad on Cape Canaveral too for Starship. So, it's certainly exciting. To me, I think this is comparable to the space race back when you guys were my age. So, I think this is an exciting time for everybody, and kids especially should get excited for this. It's going to the moon is no short feat. It's a big thing. And if they can pull this off, that's going to be something for SpaceX to be like, hey, we need to get our thing going here.
Pete, how many launches have you been to? You've been traveling down on your own and with Kenny Stomsky quite a bit.
I would say now about a dozen.
Yeah, you've been to quite a few.
The thing is, it never really gets old.
I was going to say, is it as exciting each time that you go, or?
Yeah, because they're all different. I want to catch what they're calling now an octopus launch, something that's pre-dawn, just at dawn or just at dusk, where it's dark on the ground or just about dark on the ground, but the upper atmosphere is still lit by the sun because of the curvature of the Earth. And when the gas plume gets high up in the atmosphere, it expands out. That's just less pressure on the plume. It expands out. and there's these beautiful plumes are lit by the sun, backlit by the sun, and they're just gorgeous. And you can see small nitrogen gas puffs. They get huge when, steering thrusters and stuff like that become these cool things just in the sky. And I've come close once to see one of those. But, it was one of those, you get scrubbed and then you're like, oh, come on, seriously?
So how many, Pete, have you been down to that didn't happen?
Oh, there are tons of them. Every time I've gone for my birthday, when I'm down in Florida for my birthday, I very rarely get to see one. Even if, usually 5 days, not enough. You never get to see one. Christy's been down a couple times with me and gotten scrubbed. She had to go. She flew in for a couple days and caught one in Virginia with us, which is a little bit more accessible. But, Kenny and I drove down, and then we went down to Virginia Beach to pick her up, and she was in for 2 days over a weekend, and she caught one. So it's tough. It's not – There's no guarantee it's going to happen today. That's the thing.
Now, Pete, you spend 3 weeks every July actually overseeing the entire media and computer technology and camera technology for the World Series for Little League.
For Babe Ruth, yep.
Babe Ruth, okay. I always get those two confused. So you've been doing that for a number of years. Have you been able to overlap any launches during that time?
Yes. The only problem this year is when there was 2 launches in one day. And I was in the hospital. So
that's right.
I missed both of them, and I was pissed. I was like, come on, put me in the first week or something like that, or, stuck. But my plan for that was to go up there early in the morning. I already told the vice president of Babe Ruth, is like, I'm out for the day, so, you figure it out. I can do help by remote, but I'm going to be up in Cocoa Beach for the day. And my plan was to see both launches, just kind of hang out for the day, go to the beach for a while, and then catch both launches. So it is what it is. There's no guarantee for anything. I mean, Starship, SN-15. Kenny and I went down to Boca Chica in South Padre Island just to scope the place out. We found there was an air show down there, so we got that on the way down. And we got lucky. The launch slipped, the test launch slipped to the week that we were going to be there, and we got to witness that. So, these things happen, and even then it wasn't ideal conditions. They have pretty good conditions out there today, weather-wise at the Cape. But for Starship SN-15, SpaceX didn't care. As long as they had telemetry, they didn't give a crap if you could see it or not. So they launched into clouds. The cloud deck was about 1,000 feet. We heard it. We heard it till the engines shut off. And Kenny and I looked at each other and go, well, we got about 1:10 till it either crashes or it lands.
But you couldn't see anything.
You couldn't see anything, and there's no noise when it's coming down because the engines are at a dead stop.
Right.
So we heard it relight, and we saw it relight coming out of the clouds, which was the coolest thing ever. I mean, you saw the pictures that I posted on Facebook as it's coming out of the cloud deck and landing. So, I like being part of space history. I mean, seeing that Starship land for the first time, that was the last atmospheric test launch that they're going to do with a Starship. Mm-hmm. That's it. They're like, all right, we accomplished our goals. We got good data. Time to move on.
So, Chris, you were mentioning that you were down at Cape Canaveral. My wife, Ann, and I were also down there 3 years ago, I think, in 2019. We had taken a cruise out of New York down to the islands somewhere. I can't remember where it was now. But anyway, one of our stops on the cruise ship was Cape Canaveral, and so we were able to, they had set up buses to get us in and tour the facility. And I have to tell you, it was really, really amazing. It was it's like a huge museum because you have so many of these older rockets on display. The Saturn.
Did you go out to the Saturn complex, the building?
Yes. And they have one laying down.
Yep.
It was. And what I didn't realize was that's the backup. that rocket is ready. It could go today.
It's flight proven. Yeah, it's one of two that are still
right.
existing. The other one is in Houston.
It could go today. And that was their backup rocket. But when you stand next to it, and I've got photos of Ann and myself next to it, it's just huge. And to think that this one, Pete, is even larger than that one.
Right.
So I can't even imagine what this one must look like. Pete, you want to talk a little bit
And Starship is even bigger than that.
Right. Pete, talk a little bit about this rocket.
So this rocket is an interesting concept, and let's take an infographic on it. Look at a size comparison for this rocket. It is taller than the Statue of Liberty. It is taller by far than the space shuttle, and it is just basically it's an enormous rocket, but it's not as complex, believe it or not, as the Saturn V was. So if you look at it, break it down, it is interesting in the fact that it's only really 2.5 stages. If you consider the solid rocket boosters as the first stage, if you go down the rocket here, that's the first stage. So even though the main core stage lights, technically the first stage is the solid rocket boosters.
And how long do they fire for?
About 3 minutes.
And
the same as the shuttle. They burn out the same. It is a bigger solid rocket booster. The shuttle boosters were 4 sections, and the SLS boosters are 5 sections. So it's more
these
thrust.
These are not reused. These are not.
No, in the shuttle era they were reused.
Right.
They were refurbished. In the SLS area, they're not going to reuse them. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why this whole thing is expendable when they did have reusable parts. So that is the first stage. They're going to burn out. Once you light those rockets, they cannot be stopped. They're a solid rocket motor. They can't be throttled. They can't be stopped. That's it. The nozzles can be moved to gimbal if the rocket's a little bit off course. They can adjust a little bit. But once you light those rockets, it's either go or no go. I mean, once they're gonna keep burning until they burn out. We saw that with the Challenger disaster. The solid rocket, the main tank and the shuttle blew up, and the SRBs continued to burn until they were exploded by the range officer. So they're gonna go. They're gonna go. So once they're jettisoned, when they burn out and they're jettisoned, then we go to the core stage, which is the 4 shuttle engines with a massive amount of hydrogen and a minimal amount of liquid oxygen. And the reason that is because liquid oxygen is far more dense than hydrogen. So they need more storage space for the same amount of propellant. And if you notice on the outside of the rocket, if we took a view of the outside, there's an umbilical coming down from that middle oxygen tank all the way down to the bottom. And the oxygen would freeze solid if it went through the hydrogen tank to get to the engines. It would literally freeze solid. So you can't do that. So you have to run it along the outside, and you get some condensation for that. So if you go, now that's the second stage technically, because it expends out secondly. The upper stage, which right now it's an RL-10, I believe, from the Delta IV rocket. That's going to propel them finally into orbit, and it's also going to be the means to get them into a translunar injection orbit. It's going to give them that final kick. And then on top of that sits the Orion spacecraft and with their service module. And on top of everything is the emergency abort system. So that little rocket on top, you see that little spike on the top?
Yes.
That's the emergency abort system. Do they need it now?
How does that work?
If there's an emergency, that will separate the capsule.
Launch control with an update. Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson has called a scrub for today. Again, Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson has called a scrub of the attempt of launch of Artemis 1 and the Space Launch System with the Orion spacecraft. The issue that came up was an engine bleed that couldn't be remedied, but the rocket is currently in a stable configuration. It was mostly tanked, but not completely tanked. Engineers are now working on a plan to continue gathering data about this particular engine and the bleed that didn't work out. The rocket, the hydrogen bleed, rather, was a goal of the previous wet dress rehearsal that didn't happen due to a hydrogen leak. So engineers are focused on gathering as much data as they can at this time. So they have not gone to draining the rocket just yet. They're going to keep it in its current configuration and gather that data. To summarize, we held at T-minus 40 minutes and counting after the team was unable to get past engine bleed that didn't show the right temperature once they got into the engine bleed test. And ultimately, the launch director has called a scrub for the day. The earliest opportunity, depending on what happens with this engine bleed, would be September 2nd. That is available to the launch team. However, we will await a determination of what the plan is to go forward to remedy the engine bleed and then go from there.
It's funny, if you guys see that
Again,
arc.
Availability to launch, the next availability to launch is 12:48 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, September 2nd. But we must wait to see what shakes out from their test data they're currently gathering now, and the decision that's made by the launch team about where to go from here.
You guys see that double track in the arc out there on the launch pad?
We appreciate you watching NASA TV.
Yes.
That is from the rotating service structure.
One launch attempt. This is Gerald Nail with NASA Communications signing off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
They better keep their video feed up.
You can jump on, I don't know if you can or not, but you can jump on NASA Spaceflight. It still has their feed up.
Pete, what's all the vapor that's coming out?
So that's vents, basically, as the cold cryogenic liquids. They need a place to vent when they get to the tops of the tanks, and they keep replenishing them. That's normal venting for all the middle cryo stage, the lower cryo stage. That's all normal stuff. Just to give you a graphic on what the RS-25, the shuttle engine, it's a very complex engine. It's 14 feet tall.
Wow.
The nozzles are 8 feet in diameter, and it weighs, well, more than your car.
And
so
how many of those?
4 of them.
Wow.
So those are all in the core stage. So what they found, I'm sure, this is what's happening, is they try to cycle anything they could, any vents, any pumps, that type of thing, to get to the point where they could say, all right, let's see if we can correct this remotely. Now, this happened on a shuttle launch that my son and I went to, STS-133. We were on our way out on one of the buses. Let me just make sure that doesn't play. Of course it played. We were on our way out. I'm just going to pause that. How's that? We're on our way out to view it in the NASA Causeway with one of those bus tours. And I brought my ham radio with me, which had mission audio, the same mission audio you're listening to right now. And so I had my ham radio, had it turned on, and we're out there, heading out there, and I hear him call a scrub. And I'm like, oh, you got to be joking, right? Timmy wants to see this. He's a young kid. This is 2011, one of the last shuttle missions. And I'm hearing him call a scrub because they were working a problem. And the astronauts were actually almost all the way out there. They were at the pad getting ready to mount into the shuttle. And it was an avionics problem, so it wasn't something they could fix from the ground. They had to swap out the module, and it wasn't a quick swap. So it was actually delayed a week. But with Artemis, you're not going to low Earth orbit. So in Earth, we know where the Earth is because we're on it, right? So low Earth orbit, not a big deal. You can usually go the next day because you're trying to go to the International Space Station, something like that, a known quantity in Earth orbit. The problem with this is the Earth is moving, the moon is rotating around the Earth, and to do the mission they want to do, there's only certain windows to do that. So, like, when you talk about launching a probe to Mars, some of those windows only open up every 2 years. So I saw the calendar a while back when they published it. There's only certain dates they can do this. So, like you said, the next scheduled attempt is September 2nd at 12:48. But that's determining if they can figure out what's wrong with this engine and fix it in time. If they have to pull the engine and swap it, we're talking months. It's a month's delay because they can't do that at the pad. They'd have to do that at the vehicle assembly building, and it would be a major repair. If it's just a component they can fix, get up in there and fix it. Here's the thing. Right now, with the pad in the configuration it is right now, with the rocket sitting there fueled, nobody goes out there. Like, there isn't a soul out there, and there won't be, because anything could happen. Literally anything could happen. So you're not going to see diddly squat for a while.
So, Pete, you mentioned the rocket is almost completely fueled.
That's what the launch control said.
Do they leave it fueled till Friday, or they have to drain everything? What's
right?
The
so
protocol?
what'll happen is, when they're happy with what's going on, he said they're going to leave it tanked. So they're going to leave it tanked.
Yeah, they want to test it out first and see if they can figure out what the problem is. Kind of like a wet dress rehearsal.
They're going to leave it tanked as long as they potentially can. At a certain point, you need to detank it. But yeah, they're going to leave it. They're going to leave it tanked as long as they possibly can.
And you'll know when they detank it because you'll see huge plumes of venting.
Right. Yep. Well, and not only that, but you're going to see venting, but you're also going to see, like they do with a super heavy or a Starship. Some of those places where you have a little ice forming on the outside, you'll see that start to go away as it's tanked. That's how. So there's very little cryogenic on a Starship Super Heavy, because it's stainless steel. There's very little insulation between the tanks. The tanks are actually part of the outside body, so you see a frost line forming, you know how full the tank is on a Starship Super Heavy. In this rocket, they don't, because they use insulation. They use that same foam that they used on the external tank for the shuttle. But I wish you had a live camera out there, which kind of blows. But I'm not going to pull spaceflight now because I don't want to get in trouble with those guys. NASA's stuff is public domain, and we have permission to use it, so I'd rather not get in trouble with somebody else. But
fair enough.
Hey, Pete, you want to talk a little bit about the mission itself? What I'm looking at, it was due to be 42 days, 3 hours, 20 minutes.
Correct.
And total mission miles, 1.3 million miles, which is amazing.
Yeah. So what they're doing with this is they're planning on they're testing a few things with this. They're testing the durability of the spacecraft overall. That's the big thing that they're testing. But they're also testing the projected orbit of the Lunar Gateway, which is not going to be a circular orbit of the moon. It's going to be kind of a halo orbit, which it'll pass close to the moon and go way out. They're going to be testing that with this spacecraft. And they also want to see, they're going to push it to its limits, so they're going to come in faster than they normally would. They're going to push the spacecraft beyond its design limits. So this is a very ambitious first test, something you couldn't do in the Apollo era because the computers weren't advanced enough to do the mission, honestly. You needed human input besides the computer. Now, with the advancement of the computers can fly the mission completely.
Yeah, it's I was watching something yesterday on this, and when you look at, they were saying that the cell phone actually has more computer technology.
Oh God, yes. Your watch, the watch on my Timex watch on my arm has as much computing power as the lunar lander computer had.
That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So once the spacecraft, gets into orbit, it'll deploy its solar arrays.
Yep.
And then that's what really gives it its sustained power.
Correct.
At that point.
Yep. And think about this. In the Apollo area, there was no solar technology to speak of. They couldn't do that. They had to use everything off of a fuel cell generator. So something similar to a diesel generator that generated their electricity and power. Now, the solar cell technology is such that they can power it without having that fuel cell anymore. So that means the service module can be smaller, and they can generate all the power they need.
Yeah, the use of solar power is amazing how far that has come.
It's far more efficient without an atmosphere.
Right. Yeah, right. As compared to what we have here. The ICPS, it's going to deploy 10 small satellites known as CubeSats, which will study the moon and even head further out into deep space. Pete, what do you know about those?
The CubeSat missions? I know that there are a lot of scouting things for the moon. I didn't read up on all of the CubeSat missions. Did you check that out, Chris? The CubeSats that they were deploying? I know some of it was to scout. There's some photo reconnaissance stuff to scout. And I know one was to measure radiation on the lunar, on the lunar trajectory, the translunar orbit, to measure how much the actual radiation is. So I know those were all missions that they were planning on doing. And I know that they were trying to scout for ice again. And that was the big thing that they were trying to scout for, where ice was on the moon. Because
for a water source.
Again, if you watch, great series, if you're an Apple TV Plus subscriber, the series For All Mankind, although it explores an alternate timeline where Russians landed on the moon first, and the space race never ended. It is amazing to see how fast we would have progressed had the will of the people to go to the moon and beyond stopped. I mean, we'd have a base on Mars by now.
Yeah.
We'd have permanent residency on the moon by now.
Yeah, that's fair to say.
Oh yeah.
With the way technology is and how we can. I mean, they already said they have the technology ready to go to convert things for Mars, so you can breathe on Mars, and so you can refuel rockets on Mars. They already have that stored away, ready to go.
Right.
It's just the means of getting there is the toughest part. I think the mission to the moon is a big one, because that's going to be a somewhat similar trajectory that they would take to get to Mars, because they would need to do kind of a slingshot around the moon to get to the Mars. So that's how they would do that. I think I saw a video from SpaceX saying that's how they were going to plan to do it, was to go refuel in orbit and then do a loop around the moon to get to Mars. And I don't know how long they said it would take to get there, but it's a while.
All right, here, I knew I had a graphic for that. Here's your CubeSat deployments.
There you go.
Man, you're all set up for this.
I'm trying.
Pete's got everything.
By God, I'm trying.
That's why he is our man.
I did a lot of work. I did a lot of prep work last night is what I did. So these are the CubeSat deployments, and it shows you actually the timing for them. So these are all in the ring, in the interstage, believe it or not. So there's a lunar ice cube, which is the one I was talking about for the ice. T-miles these are all, some of these are research stuff. Mapping satellite. I see the Luna H mapping, the Scout. Yeah, so these are all different stuff that some of them are college teams. And then it shows you when their deployments are in the mission.
Oh, yeah, right.
Deployment times. So there's some that are lunar science, there's some that are technology demonstrations, and there's some that are radiation measuring. Jeez, I did do my homework.
Yeah, you did.
So this
well.
explains why they didn't want to just kind of give it a shot and go anyway. Because keep in mind, if this was Starship, they probably would have been like, you know what, this is expendable. We can probably just try to launch it anyways, and if it blows, it blows. But because they actually have a payload, and this is an expendable rocket, and they spent so much time and so much money that they were like, well, maybe we shouldn't just send it. We'll dial it down here.
Well, each launch, look at it this way. Each launch cost $4.1 billion estimated. Wow. But with a B, as they said, with a B. And comparison, Starship launches are in under $100 million. So a fraction of the cost to launch a Starship Super Heavy. It's just amazing. A fraction of it. Well, because...
And it's reusable.
Elon's like, hey, guys, we're wasting money. Let's find out. His whole thing is, and he said this in interviews with Tim Dodd, which I love. A long format interview with Elon Musk is great.
The Everyday Astronaut?
Yeah, Joe Rogan's done it on his podcast. Tim Dodd's done it because they've developed a friendship, which is great for the public because they get to see that peek inside of Elon's mind. I've watched Elon standing there with Tim Dodd ask him a question, and you see the gears turning. Like, I'm thinking of a way to fix that right now, like while we're talking about it. And he won't say anything, but you can see him thinking the problem through in his brain and being able to visualize the problem. But what he says is in every iteration of his engines, he makes them smaller.
Yep.
What can we eliminate to make things simpler? And by eliminating things, you're now eliminating weight, which helps in bringing your mass to orbit costs down. So you see him thinking, and he's showing different versions of his engines in the last video that he did with Tim, how much tubing and piping and stuff like that has come out of a Raptor engine, which is powering Starship and Super Heavy. Between version 1 and version 2, they look completely different on the head of the engine. The nozzle's still the same, but on the head of the engine, they're completely different because they keep eliminating things. He goes, the more processes we can eliminate and still have a stable engine, the more tubing and piping and valves and things like that. He goes, 1, it makes it more reliable, and 2, by making it simpler, you're saving weight. And those are his goals. He said, if I could strip it down to nearly nothing, I would. But there's certain things you have to have. So there's the difference in philosophy. You know what I mean? Yes, an RS-25 shuttle engine is flight proven, but it's highly complex. It's one of the most complex engines ever built. And it's just, you're dealing with those things. So different philosophies. In the end, I think both are needed. I don't think you can do one without the other. SpaceX is getting a grant to develop part of the Artemis program. They're developing the next lunar lander, which is going to be Starship. So everything is working together to do this. I think this is a team effort. It's not a one versus the other. Like, SpaceX is great. Blue Origin sucks. NASA's like, we're the old fogies. It was Bill Nelson. Bill Nelson is just an artifact. Good Lord. He's an artifact. He's got this job because it's a patronage job. I'm sorry. Former Senator Bill Nelson, big space guy, gets tapped as the NASA head when the former NASA head under Trump was actually, Jim Bridenstine was actually pretty good. Was actually a good NASA administrator, but it's a political job, so it is what it is, right? But yeah, all these things are needed, and with the rise of like I said, Blue Origin and even the space tourism stuff, it's all needed because everybody makes little innovations. Firefly is going to be coming. Their first alpha launch is coming up soon. Rocket Lab guys in New Zealand, they're doing great things with their small launch vehicle, and they're developing a big launch vehicle which is slated to launch primarily from the U.S. in Virginia at Wallops Island. So and they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're building a huge rocket plant in Wallops Island. So that's going to become a hotbed of activity coming. It's not going to be twice a year anymore. When those guys from get really cranking down there, It's going to be monthly launches from Virginia.
Hmm.
So the space economy is booming because, that's where we're going with this. And I see a big future. We're coming in, Harry, you lived through the first golden age of space with Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo.
Yep.
We kind of hit a plateau with the shuttle. And now the shuttle was good because we learned a lot. We learned a lot about living in space. We're always learning about stuff. But the next exploration stage is now, where we're going to be going back to the moon. This is the second golden age of space. And it's not just nation states going to space anymore. It is companies going to space now, along with nation states.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to see the privatization piece really taking place, and certainly a renewed interest in getting back into space.
So I think we can wrap it up for the 9 o'clock hour. And I want to wrap it up with a video. How are we going to the moon? Which if I remember rightly, is detailing kind of like the mission overview of what's going to happen.
So you have been watching WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15 special broadcast here.
I guess we're going to try it again if they go again on the 2nd.
We'll try it again on the 2nd, but the Artemis 1 launch has been scrubbed, and hopefully this Friday, September 2nd, we may be back with you. So thanks, Pete Coles, our chief engineer and producer at WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15, for putting this together.
I guess Kenny's still sleeping.
Yeah, I think he is. We'll have a rough night.
We'll have to give him grief about that later on. Kenny's still sleeping in Vegas.
That's right. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Harry Rock.
Signing off.
Between 1968 and 1972, America launched 9 human missions to the moon, 6 of which successfully touched down, allowing 12 men to walk on the lunar surface. NASA's next chapter of lunar exploration, called Artemis, has the task of not just going to the moon to create a long-term human presence on and around it, but also to prepare for ever more complex human missions to Mars. In short, everything we must be able to do here, we must first do here. So, what will an Artemis mission look like? Everything is designed and tested with our most important element in mind, the astronauts. This is their deep space, human-rated spacecraft called Orion, built in 3 parts. The crew module, where up to 4 astronauts will live and work throughout the flight. The service module, with life support systems for the crew and its own engine and fuel reserves. And a launch abort system, with engines capable of pulling the crew module to safety during launch should anything go wrong. To accomplish the task of launching our crew and heavy payloads, NASA is building the Space Launch System, comprising of a cargo hold, an exploration upper stage, a massive core stage, and 2 extended solid rocket boosters. Altogether, this is the world's most powerful rocket, and it exceeds the legendary Saturn V of the Apollo era in numerous ways. Sitting on the launch pad, the entire rocket, fully fueled, weighs just over 6 million pounds, 5.2 million of which is just the fuel. Once ignited, there is no stopping what comes next. All 4 RS-25 engines and the 2 solid rocket boosters come to life, thundering our crew upwards. 2 minutes after ignition, the solid rocket boosters are spent and released. 8 minutes after launch, the core stage is depleted and separated. The upper stage fires briefly, placing Orion into a parking orbit around the Earth. Here, the crew reconfigure the spacecraft and check systems to confirm everything is ready for deep space travel. With a go from mission control, the crew reignite the exploration upper stage engines to leave Earth entirely. The exact timing of this maneuver is critical to reach a speed that can escape Earth's gravitational pull, but also put Orion on a course that will intersect the moon days later. Once this burn is complete, the upper stage of the SLS is jettisoned and the crew aboard Orion coast for several days toward all that awaits them at the moon. Approaching the moon, we see the fundamental differences between Artemis and Apollo. Instead of requiring Orion to serve as an expendable lunar command module or to carry a constrained lunar lander, the Artemis missions will take advantage of a different approach: pre-staging. Everything needed for lunar missions will be positioned in advance by commercial and international partners. This includes rovers, science experiments, and human-rated systems on the surface. But it also includes a dedicated lunar station in orbit around the moon called Gateway. Here at this station, we can pre-stage a robust lunar lander and establish a strong communications relay.
Designed with open standards, the Gateway can be expanded as new missions and partnerships develop, allowing multiple human missions on the moon at the same time and enabling ongoing science to be conducted even between human missions. The Gateway is also capable of adjusting its orbit to allow access to every part of the moon, something the Apollo missions could not do. But the real key in this approach is placing Gateway in a unique halo orbit to perfect the maneuvers needed for Mars missions. And with the growing list of commercial and international opportunities, Gateway is the ideal hub between Earth and all that lies beyond. Returning to our crew as they approach Gateway, the Orion must match the elliptical orbit of the station in order to successfully dock. Once on board, pre-selected crew members transfer to the lunar lander, while those assigned to Gateway remain on station. The lunar lander system itself is built for 3 unique steps: descending from the halo orbit of Gateway down to a low lunar orbit, descending from low lunar orbit to the surface, and once the lunar mission is complete, launching from the surface of the moon and ascending all the way back to the orbiting Gateway. Once back aboard the Orion spacecraft and undocked from Gateway, the crew fire their engine once to break out of the halo orbit, and once again to sling the spacecraft around the moon, placing it on a multi-day trajectory back towards Earth. As they near the end of this journey, the service module is released, and the crew module is oriented heat shield first. Entering Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour, the friction of air slows Orion considerably, while also subjecting it to temperatures of 5,000 degrees. With the Orion now at just 300 miles per hour, a series of parachutes uniquely tested and produced for this moment deploy, decelerating the craft to just 20 miles per hour for splashdown. With each successful mission, Artemis ushers in the next wave of men and women to explore our moon and prove that together we are ready to go beyond.